It's the Craggy Rugby podcast. I'm Rob Murphy. A special episode for you, Andy Friend, mid-off season, I'm calling it, joining us from Australia for a chat about the season gone and the season to come. Joining me to co-host today's show is Linley MacKenzie. Hi, Linley.
Hi, how are you doing? And good morning, Andy. Oh, sorry, I should say good evening, Andy.
Yeah, good evening or good morning to you guys. How are you?
Andy, you're joining our podcast for a nice relaxed chat. We've picked the perfect time because you really haven't a whole lot else to do right now.
No, we're a little bit confined, Rob. This is day 11 of our 14-day quarantine. But at 7 o'clock, so in an hour's time, we have only 2.5 days left. Not that we're counting, but that'll get us to 36 hours. So we're getting close.
You know, it's a bit, I hope it's not too heavy to start, but what do you think is it about the importance of, like, you've been away a lot in your life, but the importance of home that forces you or makes you do something like this, you know, that like makes it like almost a necessity to just go through this because you need to get home for a little while?
Yeah, well, listen, I think the most important thing in our lives is our family. And I haven't been home to see a lot of my family. We've been fortunate to have our two boys over to see us last January, Kerry's birthday. They came across for that, so that was fantastic. But that's now 15 months ago. Actually, maybe even 16 months ago, if I do my maths right. But my parents, I haven't seen them for 3 years. My brothers, mates, Kerry's mum and dad and her sisters, we haven't seen them for 3 years. So it was something we were planning on doing last off season, but as we all know, the world shut down, so we couldn't do that. And then when I had my chat with Willie Ruan this year around staying on at Connacht, which, you know, as I said to him, Willie, I love it here, but I'm not prepared to stay unless I can go home and see the family. And he was great. He just said, well, how much time do you want? I said, well, like, we get 4 weeks holiday, so I'd like to have 4 weeks with them, but I don't want to do 2 weeks of quarantine here and 2 weeks of quarantine back in Ireland. So that's my 4 weeks. So I said, if you don't mind, mate, I don't know what the world's going to be doing at the time when we travel, but if I can have 4 weeks with my family, that's all I asked for. And he said, it's yours. So we're now sitting in lockdown. The good news is when we come back to Ireland, we won't have to be doing that because both Kerry and I are vaccinated now, and we will be coming home via a route that doesn't, at the moment anyways, on the green list. They're all on the green list, so we should be fine coming back.
Well, judging by the backdrop, Andy, of where you're sitting, you couldn't pick a better place to be in quarantine, could you?
No,
and
listen.
For the listeners out there, he's sitting with this beautiful blue sky, the sea, and a palm tree waving with the slight breeze.
It's amazing what Zoom can do, isn't it? And this is something we've all learned over the last 18 months, is how to play with your backdrop. I can promise you,
to tidy the room, Andy. It was as simple as that, was it?
The room's actually very tidy. It's probably more to protect Kerry sitting behind me in the water at the moment. No, so what you're seeing there, Linley's hardly what we're looking at, but listen, we've been very fortunate. We've got ourselves a room with a balcony, and that was the one thing that I was dreading. I was dreading getting a room that didn't have an open window, and I know a few people who've come home and had the 14-day lockup without that. I mean, the one thing in Australia, we had Abraham Papali'i and Jared Butler go and do their quarantine in New Zealand, but very different there. You can actually get out, and they allow you out between 8 and 5 in the morning. 8 and 5 through the day, 8 in the morning till 5 in the afternoon. And they've got a little, depends on the hotel you're at, but you've got a little patch. But here in Australia, you are not allowed out of your room. You get a knock on the door. You're meant to wait a minute or 2 minutes, they say, but it's only a minute until you can open that door. You're not allowed to see anybody. You get that's your food drop 3 times a day. And yeah, otherwise you're just here, just on your lonesome. But the good news for us is both Kez and I get on well, so we haven't killed each other yet. We're still here.
You got the bike on the balcony. I was actually, I've never been to Australia myself, and I think I was just blown away by it's Brisbane you're in, isn't it? And the skyline looks fantastic.
Beautiful, yeah. No, we haven't had, every day hasn't been like that, Rob, I will admit, but we've had, like today was another stunner, yesterday was a stunner. We've had a couple of rainy days, but it just reminds you of probably how different the climates are. And this is winter here, but the winter here is probably as warm, if not warmer than the Galway summer at the minute.
You could probably predict this, but I'm going to circle back to this a little bit later because I want to know what you've been watching on Netflix and what books you've been reading. But we'll get to that in a while, right? So let's get stuck back into the rugby because our listeners will be like, come on, ask them about where things stand. Like, let's start with just a kind of a general, like, I feel overall somehow by hook or by crook, with a few stumbles along the way, Connacht ended up in a good place at the end of the year. What would you say to that?
Yeah, I think we did. It's been funny because been talking to a few mates back here, and they've kept tabs of our progress. And they said, "You must be happy, friendy." I said, "Well, I am actually happy because one, it's been the most bizarre year I've ever been involved in." And I was asked actually on the Galway Bay FM season wrap up with William and Jerry and George, why was I worried about the inconsistencies? And I said, well, I'm actually not. It's frustrating, the inconsistencies, but to me, rugby is a microcosm of life and what's going on. And our whole world in the last 18 months has been inconsistent. You don't know from day one to day two what's happening, and all the session plans and all the training plans that you may have mapped out can change in a heartbeat. So it didn't surprise me at all that on a few occasions you saw a performance that just like, where the hell did that come from? And on other occasions you saw that from other teams too. You look at the number of away wins by all teams this year was just incredible because every team was going through that. So for me, I think the great success of this year was we got through it with no games of ours being cancelled, no games of ours being postponed, no one in our close community. Yes, we had some COVID cases, but no one got very, very ill with that. And we managed to at the end of the day, we managed to beat the three big provinces away from home, which was great. I thought we had, that was a brilliant record for us, or a brilliant milestone to achieve. And at the same time, we continue to blood a lot of our young players and keep the majority of our players together for next year. So to me, it was a year just to get through, which we've done. I think we've done some good things in there. We've had some frustrating performances, but I reckon we're ready to launch into a pretty special 2 years coming up.
Do you know, I follow a lot of sports around the world, Andy, and like I've watched, things like American sports where they're playing 80-game seasons, or if you want to talk baseball, 160-game season. I mean, I'd say that's mind-boggling to you because, like the ups and downs that must happen in that. Like, in this point in time here, we're in July, you can stop and go, would you like to tell yourself in the winter, would you like to speak to December Andy Friend, say, don't worry about this defeat? Like, do you find yourself reflecting back and going, why was I getting so worked up about that loss at that point in time? Because the bigger picture is always what ultimately matters. Yeah,
I do. And again, I know some of the games that we had this year. That was actually a review from the players back to us. We got really cranky on the performances where we weren't good enough, and we probably over celebrated some of the performances that we did win. But I think again, that's just a reflection of what we were living through. Everyone was living through these times. It was like, well, if something good happens, you're gonna go, yoo-hoo, that's brilliant, because you haven't had much joy throughout the course of the week because you haven't been able to do anything. And similarly, when you have a performance that probably wasn't as good as you wanted it to be, you probably I definitely overreacted to some of those because of the frustration of everything else that was going on. So yeah, I think it's been at the same time, I will also say I'm normally not one to get too overexcited or too over cranky, but I suppose from what the players had seen in the previous 2 years, I was probably over exaggerated on both ends this last season.
One more question specifically about last season is just, you know, if you told me what the shape of the team would look like at the end of the year from what it had started, I don't think I remember a season that has thrown up so many interesting narratives. Like, you know, Shane Delahunt's consistent performances throughout the year, Niall Murray's emergence, Keane Prendergast's emergence, Jared Butler, or I'm going into Paul Boyle making the Irish team. And then you get into that back line, and specifically Tom Daly, you know, becoming this like fulcrum of everything Connacht were trying to do, and then becoming the international squad member that he now is. Is that the reflection that you would have on it as well? It just, I don't know if you yourself, and I'm wondering if you as a management team could possibly have predicted what your first choice 15 would be by the end of the year.
No, I don't think we could have. And in fact, when you go back through the teams, you know, which we keep, and it was, you know, every now and then I flick back through them, I think, wow, how different's the team we're putting out, you know, in the second last game of the season to the one that we put out in the second game of the season. So, yeah, we had the emergence of some really talented youngsters coming through. Some of them you've mentioned there, and we've also had the drop off of other players who've been pretty much household names over the course of the last few seasons. You know, and a lot of that through injury, some of that through injury, some of it just through form. But yeah, there's been a real emergence of new talent, and probably a drop off of some of the older blokes.
Andy, when you look at that season, not just the performances on the field and the frustrations that you might have, but overall, how was the? I'm kind of interested in the mental health and how. I mean, like, I get a bit frustrated during COVID, you know, and I'm sure my family, you know, are the ones who take the brunt of it. I'm just wondering about how that was all managed, and were there any particular episodes that, you know, you could put down to COVID, this frustration with players, or maybe, you know, the mental health of them, that sort of thing.
Yeah, I think on the whole we were pretty good with that, Linley. I think you know, we have Aidan O'Flynn, who does an amazing job behind the scenes, and I know he was in touch with a fair few members of the playing squad and staff during the course of the year. We had Jack Birtwistle come in this year, not necessarily in the mental health or mental well-being area, but he was definitely there as a support around the mental out of the mental skills, I suppose, or the performance skills is his area, but to support, but it would definitely lean into that area of the well-being stuff. And Deirdre Lyons, who also works with Rugby Players Ireland. So we've got a neat little support group around us. I will say, yeah, there were times there where just on different days, you could see different people struggling big time with whatever, whether it was, you know, the not being able to go and see a loved one, or the fact that they were in close contact of someone. And, you know, we had a few of those through the course of the year. I think we had in the end, you know, close to 10 people who throughout the course of the year had COVID, and others that were close contacts that, you know, had to then stay away. And that became really tricky. And I suppose the stigma of COVID early on was not a pleasant one for anybody, because everyone's like, what have you done wrong? Well, I've done nothing wrong. Somehow I've managed to contract this. So as time went on, the stigma became less and less, and I think people became more comfortable with the fact that, well, that person's done nothing wrong, but we just hope they're going to be okay. And so it stopped. There stopped being angst and anger towards a person, rather than actually, you okay. So I think we all grew as a society around that stuff too. But yeah, on the whole, I think we handled it because we got good people and we got good support networks. I'm not going to say we got everything, because I'm sure we didn't. But as I said, we didn't lose any games through COVID, and we've all come out at the other end of it, and we're all still tight, and we're looking forward to next year.
Do you think there were any benefits from COVID? I mean, did it make you tighter? Did it produce performances where you all were a much tighter group that you really wanted to fight for Connacht maybe more so than before?
Yeah, there's definitely been. I reckon that's one of the great things in life when you're forced with or faced with adversity. How can you find a silver lining? And it's something I always try and pride myself on. Try and find the good in everything. So what came out of COVID, I know we can survive in anything now. I know we haven't had a team meeting for 18 months, 16 months. Let's put it there. Well, because the last team meeting we had was in March when we came back from Port Elizabeth. That would have been the last team meeting in the previous year. So we had no team meetings. All those little corridor chats that you have, the change room chats, which which is what footy's about. It's about connection and about checking in with people and making sure people are okay. We haven't been able to have those. And yet here we are, we managed to get through a season and find other ways, whether it was Zoom calls, team meeting calls, lots of texts, lots of phone calls, catching up with people outside, catching up with people in different ways. So we've managed to survive all of that, which I think is a real compliment to the staff and to the playing group. The messaging of getting messages through around our game preview, what we were trying to do in any given game, and then how we reviewed that. We couldn't do that face to face. So being able to deliver those messages in many different formats, whether it was via a recording or just on the Zoom stuff, or putting stuff up on TVs or putting sheets of paper up, we found ways to get around that. So all of these little things that we had to adjust to and to try and still deliver a package to do. Some of them, I reckon, we'll keep some of those things. Some of them, we'll throw them out and say, just get us back to what we used to have. But I think the biggest thing, though, Linley, the connection, the lack of connection with people. And I'm a big handshaker. I love a handshake. Why? Because first thing you do in the morning, you shake someone's hands and you get a feel straight away as to where that bloke's at. Has he had a good sleep? Has he not had a good sleep? Has he got a sweaty palm? Has he got a strong handshake? Is he looking in the eye? You feel so many things through that, just that touch. And we haven't had that touch. So that's been tricky. But we've also, as I said, we found other ways to manage that. And some of those will definitely stay on.
I'm curious about where you think Connacht are as a province right now, and it's a huge question, but that's why we're having a chance to chat in the off season, because it's a hard question to ask you during the year. But can I give you a little bit of perspective on where I'm coming from, which is I always have this thing, and it wasn't said in this context, but I took it in this context. When we were walking out of Murrayfield 5 years ago, Alan, who's our producer today, said to me, it doesn't get any better than this. And he mentioned it in a completely different way. And because he's an extremely positive individual, as we all know on this podcast. But I took it the wrong way, I think, because I've constantly gone back to that in my mind over the last couple of years in particular, and trying to understand, what do we want to get out of the provincial rugby team in the West of Ireland? What do rugby people from the West of Ireland want from their provincial rugby team? And what I've kind of found myself realizing is there's been multiple moments since that have been fantastic and that have kind of added to it. And you've mentioned one element of it this year was the 3-away into provincial wins. Even without the crowds there, you can throw in the win against Ulster in the Aviva. Now you're at 4 interprovincial wins in the calendar year, or in the season, if you like. That perspective, Andy, because I don't know if you've noticed how we have been wrestling for an identity that slots into the follow-on from a title. Have we found it yet? Do we still have to find it? And possibly, does it matter?
Yeah, I think it's a great question, Rob. And I'll give you my simple answer on it. I wasn't here for the final, and I wasn't here for the year after that, and I wasn't here for the following year after that. So when I came in at the start of 2018-19, my first year I felt was to regain trust in the squad, was to get confidence back in that squad, and to say to staff and to players, you're okay. We're actually okay. We got good people here. We've got a good footy team, and we can go and do some stuff. So most of my work that year was built on that. The second year was to be a year where we could add to that, but we got halfway through it and the season got cut. And then the third year, which would be a year where we'd really now go to a new level, we haven't been able to because we've just been surviving. So I feel like we've wasted a year and a half just through COVID, where we've just had to tick the boxes. We've just got to get things done. And what I'm really excited about is this next 2-year period. And it's actually the first time in my rugby career, 27 years I've been coaching, that I'm heading into a 4th season and to a 5th season. So I've never done that previously. I've been the coach that's come in normally into a team that's falling apart, fix the thing, adjust a few things, get rid of a whole heap of people, bring a whole heap of new people in, and then I get an opportunity to take. I get an opportunity to go somewhere else, and I go and do that, or I get sacked, which has happened on a couple of occasions. So this is uncharted waters for me. But where I'm at the moment is exactly that. I reckon what the one area that I'll be critical of myself with, we haven't nailed down our identity. And what is it that when anyone comes to watch us play or plays against us, you walk out of the sports ground, or we leave your home dressing room, and you go, Jesus, they were boom, 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 and they were fast. So our 3 words coming up for this new season: we're going to be fast, we're going to be relentless, we're going to be adaptable. They're the 3 things that's going to be the on-field rugby identity of Connacht Rugby. And if we can be that, and through everything that the way we train, the way we act around the sports ground, the way we act in the community, the way we act on the football field, we want to be that. And then I'll also present a vision for the players as to what this looks like. I was asked a really good question by Willie Ruan just before I signed for the last 2 years, and he said to me, tell me, Freddie, in 2 years' time, just say you take this contract in 2 years' time, you're driving down College Road for the last time, look over your shoulder, what do you see? What do you want to see? And so I rattled off about 4 or 5 things, and he said, great, we'll go and make it happen. And it was a really good way of saying to me, well, that's the vision then. So I've now got to make that come to life. And I'm not going to share with you what that is today, because I'm still actually ploughing my way through it, and that's one of the beauties of being in quarantine. I've had a lot of time to think about that. But with that on-field identity and then this vision, I actually think if I can be so much clearer with the staff and the players, we can launch to another level again. And that's really exciting for me. That's really exciting. And, I think we've had a reasonable, 3 years. Have we shot the lights out? No, not yet. Can we? I do think we can. I do think we got the makings of a playing squad and a coaching squad to go and do that. So that's the intention.
I feel like within Irish sport, I think we do look at ourselves and how we relate to the other teams coming from the GA and stuff. So I think the interprovincials are really important to rugby people in the West. And I think, I think I found the reaction of maybe all 3 provinces when they lost to Connacht, possibly, I'm trying to find the right words, because, as a journalist, you're objectively following the team from a partisan point of view, obviously, because we speak to a Connacht audience, but at the same time, you can enjoy a result. And I enjoyed, in some ways, the frustration of Munster fans and Munster players on the pitch afterwards, because it was nice to see their feathers ruffled, if you like. And that's fine. That's part of sport. But I just wonder if this new United Rugby Championship format that's going to force Connacht to actually even be better, that's going to set the bar at, like, you can't qualify finishing 4th among the Irish provinces anymore. You're going to have to take the step next level, and maybe leaving aside this idea that we're waiting for one of those other provinces to fall back to our level, that we have to get to their level. That's what was so interesting to me this year about the away interprovincial wins. Home wins are home wins, and we've done that for 3 decades every so often. Away wins are rare, and we did it 3 times in the one season. And I think away wins speak to me more about getting up to their level rather than them having bad days coming back. So I guess that's my point. But my question is, how important do you think it is that Connacht are better than 1, 2, maybe all 3 of the other provinces on a regular basis?
I think it's really important. And I think, and I'd agree with you, like, we shouldn't be considering ourselves as the 4th province. We're not. We're one of 4. And our results this year showed us that we can beat Leinster at the RDS, and we can beat Munster at Thomond, and we can beat Ulster up at Ravenshill. So let's go and do it again. We can do that. And I think, I think certainly within the squad, that belief is starting to get there. I'm not going to say it's there yet, but it's starting to get there. There's certainly, and again, when I came in, there was certainly an expectation, it's not an expectation, but there's an attitude sometimes when you lose against a Leinster or Munster and Ulster. Well, we probably should be losing. No, you shouldn't be losing. Because if you think you are, you're going to lose, right? So it's how do we adjust that? And those wins away this year, I think, will stand us in great stead to be able to launch again from that. So, and I think also having the 6 blokes up in the Irish squad this year, having Bundy away on the British Irish Lions tour, again, just shows us and some of the players we've also got coming in again. We've got Lever Fafita coming in, who's a Tongan international. We've got Mac Hansen coming in, who's also gone and, he's played Super Rugby and is a quality footballer. We've got, the growth of all these young fellas, another year under their belt where they're starting to believe things, the likes of a Niall Murray and and a Keen Prendergast and a Geordie Duggan and these young fellas coming through, which, you know, they've got no fear, those blokes, which is what you want. They don't give a stuff about anybody, which is exactly what you want. We're pulling on the Connacht jersey. We can go and beat anyone. Good. Well, let's go and do it. So I think with this identity and with us, we've got a new coaching team, as we know about too. I just think that, you know, it's ripe for us to go to another level. But to your point, Rob, we've got to believe it internally. We've got to believe that we're not just a fourth province, and those wins weren't just flukes. They're things that if we play our best, we can knock them off. And that's what we want to be.
Andy, when you talk about you don't want to share that vision, is that a vision that has changed over time since you've been here? Or was it a vision that you had when you first came here?
It's a vision that, and again, this is the area where I get cranky with myself, Linley. It's a vision that it probably hasn't changed, but I wasn't good enough to verbalize it. And I just have the expectation, well, watch what I do, and that's the vision, if that makes sense to you. So I don't want to sound conceited in that way at all, but I think there's a certain way to live and a certain way to do things. And if you do it that way, and you are, I'll use the word respectful. If you are respectful, then yet competitive, then you'll earn people's respect, and you'll be a team that and an individual that people want to follow and that people believe in and want to get behind. So, but I certainly wasn't. I haven't verbalized that, and I sit there and I go, well, why wouldn't I verbalize that? And it's like, I don't know, to be honest with you, because there's probably so many other things I was trying to fix and get sorted. But I have a vision. It's not going to be long-winded, I promise you. It's not going to be we want to go and do that. It's not that at all. It's just going to be a couple of really simple words around the way we behave. Because to me, it's our behaviours, which is what's going to make us, our identity and our behaviours on how we achieve those things on a daily basis. It's going to be the next thing that launches us forward into hopefully another title, which, you know, you good folk experienced back in 2015-16.
So is it when you talk about the vision, is it a vision for your coaching era, or is it a vision that you hope will continue beyond that, something that will be put in place permanently in the mentality of Connacht?
Yeah, well, it's probably twofold to that. So I definitely have to believe in it, but I also think this is one of the great things where I felt there was synergy as soon as I met with Willie Rowan and the board around when I was first appointed. I just felt there was great synergy. And as we know, like Connacht has three very strong values anyway: ambition, belief, and community. And very rare do you actually come into an organisation and those values are laid out for you. You've often got to try and find those. But Connacht's are very strong, and they're not just words written on a wall. You know, I think Connacht has enormous ambition. It wants to be a province that fights on its own. We want to build that stadium. It has belief, so we do believe that we belong in Pro 14 and now in the URC, that was called United Rugby Championship, and we believe that we're the worthy of any opposition. We can take any of them on, and the community. I think there's a tremendous tie with our community. You know, I feel that's a really special part of Connacht Rugby. So those three words, they're living and they're alive and kicking already within Connacht Rugby, but which is probably a reason why I didn't then come charging and say, well, I also want us to be this, because I felt, well, yeah, there's enough stuff around values. It's already here. But as I've learned over the last 3 years, I needed to be a little bit more succinct and precise on what I think is right, because as Willie says, at the end of the day, friend, it's your team, which it is. I'm the head coach here. It's not my team, it's our team. But as the head coach, I need to provide a very clear identity and vision, which is something that we will be doing. And I said, I think it's something really simple that can give players and staff a lot more clarity on how to be the best version of themselves on a daily basis. And if we all do that, well, the sky's the limit. We can do whatever we want to do.
Yeah, I'm interested, Andy, in just a specific about just links in a couple of things we were talking about. Okay, so one, you mentioned Jordan Duggan and Niall Murray and the way these lads are settling in. And one of the things I noticed during the course of the season is the identity of the team could quickly change with the makeup of the players on the field, which must be an exciting thing from your perspective. And by that, I mean, you know, we were really interested in how well we did away from home. I'm curious within this question whether you feel that some of those away trips back and forth in the day helped forge an identity among the squad and help the team bond in a quick way and help some of these younger players settle in very quickly, and maybe just speak to how Connacht are evolving and maybe not necessarily needing certain characters to perform.
Yeah, I think I think that youth that's coming through, as I said, it's fearless, you know, and what we saw with some of those young blokes, the Duggans and the Prendergasts and the Murrays coming through, Niall Murray's coming through, is no one had heard about them, but they just threw themselves into everything, and it makes then the blokes who they're replacing or who they've taken their spot, you know, the likes of a Dennis Buckley, for example, or an Alton or a Gav or a Quinn, makes them as more senior players look at that and go, Jesus, we got to start to actually pull our finger out here because these young bucks are coming through. So there was that part of it. So that internal competition, I honestly feel at the moment we have tremendous internal competition, and we could pick 2 15s at the moment. They'd be pretty similar. They'd be pretty similar. So that's one thing that adjusts the identity of the team. I think the other part of it is, which is linked into what we were talking about before. These young blokes actually do believe that we can go and beat anybody because they haven't been around to cop some of the hidings that the other blokes have copped. So, you know, you get this real excitement when it doesn't matter who you're taking on, Racing over in Paris. We can beat them. We can beat them. Yeah, bloody oath we can beat them. And we didn't, but we nearly did. But if you'd asked any punter, can Connacht go and beat Racing in Paris? Not a chance, not a snowball's chance. But we nearly did. So, you know, this belief and this confidence that's there, and this is probably my only other fear, is that the longer you stay at Connacht, does that get washed away? I hope it doesn't. And in fact, I think it's really important that we don't, because what we're trying to then remove is if we do have those non-believers, they get washed away. It's not the young blokes whose belief gets washed away. It's the non-believers. They get moved out. And we keep bringing this young, exciting, you know, the spunky player, I'll call him, coming through that believes they can do it. And then linked into that, you know, as I said, we've got a coaching group coming through that not too dissimilar the way we bring players through. 2 very good young academy coaches in Cully Tucker and Mossy Lawler coming through. We've got Dievold Senegal coming from France. Those 3 men only want to, you know, they're only here to be winners. And I'm not saying that the current coaching staff, the coaching staff has been there, didn't want to win. That we all wanted to win, but I just feel that we've just got this new group coming through, and then Pete Wilkins come in and do a senior role, which I think he's an incredible coach, Pete, and I think given that new space for him to develop, he's only going to blossom, and we're going to see some really good things coming out of him too.
Just one thing, I want to circle back on the coaching team. I know Linley wanted to chat about that as well, but just I was interested in something we've been talking about lately, has been the sports ground facilities. And I'm just, you know, it does feel like we're slightly stalled, obviously COVID related. Maybe that turns out to be a good thing in terms of at least it hadn't started, so we weren't caught in a trap there. But you know, like Alex Wootton was in the Irish Independent, and in a really interesting interview during the course of the season, he mentioned in a kind of a discussion about adversity that they had to tog out in a tent basically, and the conditions and stuff. But I felt when I read it, I kind of winced because it just took me back to the early noughties when Connacht just really were losing out in terms of players not coming west and stuff because they felt the facilities weren't great. But how important is it that Connacht catch up, if they have to catch up, facilities wise? So you're not training across town, so you're training in the same spot, all that kind of stuff. And how anxious are you about that reality?
Oh, I think it's a must, and it will happen. I'm really anxious to get it happening, but I'm also very conscious of the world that we're currently living in, and I know it was ready to go. Like, should be happening, sods should be turning now, but they're not because of, you know, what's just transpired over the course of the last 16 months. So that's not Connacht Rugby's fault. That's what's happened in the world. But I do know the appetite and the desire, go back to that ambition and belief that it's still there. We know we need that. And I think everyone, from a coaching player point of view, they understand that. Yes, we would have loved it to have happened yesterday, and we'd love to have the facilities that some of the other provinces and other teams have, but we don't. But as I keep saying to people too, we're living through, again, I think every year of Connacht Rugby has been fascinating, but this one is fascinating in its own little way, and that, I reckon in 10, 15 years' time, we'll look back and go, wow, did we actually achieve those results out of what we had there? And the answer is yes. But we did that knowing that that's giving hope and belief to the young Connacht players wanting to come through, and it's giving hope and belief to the public to come and support us. And we had to fight really, really hard to get what we got. And now look at it. Now look at, I said when I'm driving down the road, College Road, looking over my shoulder, I said, I'd love to see the stadium finish. Now it won't be in 2 years. I know it won't be in 2 years, but there'll be elements of it that are going. And then maybe come back in 10 years and have a look at it and go, cool. Some of that stuff that we actually went through has allowed this to happen, and that's pretty powerful. That's pretty special stuff. So let's be honest with it. It's not ideal, but can we make do with it? Yes, we can. And can we make it work? Yes, we can. Do we want it to change? 100% we do, and it will change because we have a board and a CEO that is busting to make that change. But in due course, when COVID settles, it will happen.
And you talked about the young players coming in and they're fearless, and they have a different mentality. They want to win. But how is that shaped by Connacht actually winning a trophy? I mean, I look back to the previous year when Connacht did finally win, the Pro 12 as it was then, and there seemed to be a much more willingness of players from outside to come in to play for Connacht, to attract those players. We're now a winning team. That's still in situ and it's been taken on, but how much important is for you for that to continue? If we don't win a trophy soon, how will that continue to shape Connacht in the future?
Yeah, winning definitely, winning is definitely what you want to be about. You want to be winning trophies. But as we know, since 1885, we've won one. So it's not like we've been doing it, every sort of decade we do it. It's interesting. I know you're going to come to it, Rob, because you said that before, the books that I'm reading, but I'm just about to finish The Dynasty, the book on New England Patriots. And there was a team that they hadn't won anything either. And then they got onto this winning run when, the likes of Robert Kraft bought the company or bought the business and bought in Bill Belichick and Tom Brady. And out of that, they've, where I'm at to at the moment, 2018, they've been to 9 of the last 10 AFC championships and they've won 4 Super Bowls. Like, just incredible. And that winning run. But what's also incredible is the years that they don't win in between there, everyone's writing them off because they're mugs. They haven't won. So this whole view of sports writers and sports people who, as soon as you're not winning, where you're a mug, that's just life in sport, isn't it? So we all want to be at the top there. But as long as, and this is where it's really important that, as a head coach and as a staff, that we stay strong to what we're about. And we know we can't win every game. We know we're going to have games that are going to be hugely disappointing, and we certainly didn't go out there and try and achieve that. But as long as we can continue to fight hard to stay on task and keep building the squad and keep building our identity and keep building the player to deliver a more consistent performance over the course of the year, then we're in a good spot. Does that equal a trophy? I hope so, Linley. I really do. But as we know, they're pretty damn hard to come about. But I just want us to continue to deliver performances that every time we come off, we know there's not much more that we could have given out there. And I think if we can be that, I think we're at the stage where if we can be that team and consistently deliver that, well, I think we can go and win another title, and hopefully in the next 2 years we do that.
But I'm interested in the pathway. I mean, you've got the elite team, but what about underneath that elite team in Connacht? What about the Niall Murrays who want to come up and come into Connacht? Connacht is obviously, has a few disabilities in terms of its numbers are playing, the numbers of schools that are playing. Does that need to change? Or can it be changed? Can it be encouraged?
there's a lot of work going on behind the scenes to try and improve those pathway systems. Merv Murphy's been employed to go in and do pretty much what Cully Tucker was doing, but there's another position coming now for another talent spotter out there to try and build up the schools. We'll continue to support the schools and the clubs around Connacht to try and bring these younger guys through. So again, it all takes time, but I can promise you there's enormous work going on behind the scenes to try and continue to add support to the pathway systems, both playing and for coaches, which are both important. So will we see an immediate effect with that? Well, probably not, but certainly, again, if we're able to look back in 10 years' time and go, okay, I can see where that was going now. But I can, hand on my heart, I can tell you that there is work going on in that area, and it's something that we're very, very aware that unless we have that homegrown talent coming through, we're not going to survive.
And in terms of the new coaching setup, you inherited a coaching setup essentially. So is this a coaching setup you would have chosen had we had all the money in the world in Connacht? Or is it important that we do promote from within, or would you have preferred to maybe look elsewhere for coaches apart from obviously Senegal?
Well, with the coaching group that I inherited, I love that coaching group. I couldn't have been happier with that. I thought as a four, we worked really, really well together. Pete was doing the defence, and I thought he had experience in defence before, but I thought on the whole our defence over the course of the last 3 years worked really, really well. Nige with his attack, probably one of the most flamboyant attacking coaches I've seen out there, gets his message across. I thought he was great in that area, and Jimmy with the forwards, and I thought, certainly the first couple of years with our forward pack, I thought was fantastic. We hit a stumbling block this year, but Jimmy being Jimmy built his way out. I managed to get the team out of that at the tail end of the season. So I think the coaching group that I inherited there, I thought we worked really well together. What became really evident though was the structure, the way we'd had it laid out, which was an attack coach, a defence coach, a forwards coach. We became very siloed and blokes stuck in their lanes. So, and again, as the head coach, I have to take responsibility for that. So the new structure that we put in place, and the new structures come about because, again, for opportunity for Jimmy and for Nige, both have chosen to want to move on, which is great. We support that. But it's allowed us to build a new structure. So in answer to the second part of your question, would I have changed? Would I have gone shopping anywhere else? No, I wouldn't have. I saw Pete Wilkins as the perfect bloke to step into that senior role. And that senior role is a role now that oversees both attack and defence. And actually, it was Pete that shared it with me. He said, Freddie, we'd be one of the only sports in the world where, like, if you look at football, English football, you've got a coach that looks at the attack and the offence and the defence, as it does in American football. But here we have, quite siloed, an attack coach and then a defence coach. But there's all this transition that happens in between them. So surely they've got to be interlinked. And we started to look at that model, and it made perfect sense to me. Well, Pete, for you to develop as a coach, you can't stay as a defence coach much longer. So we need now to give you the opportunity to grow as an attack coach and offence coach. So if you can oversee it, offence and defence would be brilliant. And then we get in two very good young coaches, Cully Tucker, to come in and do the defence. So under the guidance of Pete, who's had that for the last 3 seasons or 4 seasons, but also to add his own flavour to that and be somebody who could support the new forwards coach coming in. And this is an area, again, upon reflection of the old coaching team that we had, Pete Wilkins, Andy Friend, Nigel Carolan, all backs, when we couldn't really offer much support to Jimmy. So Jimmy had that forward back pretty much on his own. But now we've got Cully Tucker, who's, ex-hooker, a lot of experience in forwards play anyway. He'll be doing the defence, but also be a support for Diovault Senegal to support him with the forward play. And then Mossy Lawler comes in, who's a extremely hard-working, driven young skills coach to work on the skills of the players as well as the attack stuff, all under the umbrella and the guise of Pete Wilkins. So I'm really excited by it. And then Diovault, I know I just brushed over that, but there's a bloke who's played in France for over a decade. He's coached in France for the last 4 or 5 years. A lot of experience. One of the first blokes that was on his resume list was Heineke Meyer. Now I know Heineke very well from Super Rugby days, and Heineke employed him at Stade Francais. So I rang Heineke and I said, "Tell me about Dierbold." He said, "You'll never find a better forwards coach." And I said, "Is your mate of yours?" He said, "No, he's not." He says, not a mate, but I didn't know him before I employed him, but he's brilliant, friendly. Why? I said, "Because we're looking for a forwards coach." He said, "It'd be hard to find better, mate." So, great support from an ex Springbok coach and a bloke who's coached around the world. So I'm really excited by what we've got there. And I just think, again, the timing of it's right to take us to a new level.
And I'm curious, a lot of people out there listening, I know myself, have management roles in their lives and in their workplaces. Sometimes it might be just, a person coming in that they need to guide, or sometimes it might be a whole staff. And I'm just wondering, how would you sum up your management style? And just as a caveat to that, sometimes I find in the management role that you're nearly trying to design something that you could step back from and it'll all work itself. But obviously that's not what happens. So maybe just give us a kind of an idea of what you think philosophically management is to you.
Yeah, I think, listen, I'll start by saying, Rob, my role has to change again. So, my role as a head coach is evolving every year. It changes. So, I think my role heading into this next year is going to be very different to the role I just had. My view on management, but I'll call it leadership, because I think it's more leadership than it is management. I believe in giving people space and support for them to be the best they can be. I'm 100% comfortable with autonomy. I'm 100% comfortable with people getting the accolades and the credit for things that they're doing. And in fact, if I can sit back in the background, and I suppose the best term I've ever heard, which to me depicts my leadership style, I'll call myself the gardener, and I'm hands-on, and I beg your pardon, I'm eyes on and I'm hands off. So I'm watching everything, but I don't have my hands stuck in the middle of things, because if I'm doing that, well, there's no point having the other people there. So I probably consider myself a gardener where, if that needs a bit of watering, I'll water it. If that weed needs to be dug out, I'll dig the thing out. But I'm going to sit back and let the garden take over. And let it grow its own way, but I'll also keep it in shape, and I'll make sure that it doesn't get out of control. So that would probably be the best way to describe it. But I'm a massive believer in zoning in on people's strengths and allowing them to be the best they can be at that, and trying to. I call it with the players. I say, one of the first questions I ever ask a player is, when I meet them, is, "What's your weapon?" And I say, "What do you mean?" "Well, what can you be world class at?" "Geez, I haven't thought of that, friendly." "Well, think about it, because I want you to be that." And it's the same with the staff. What can you be world class at? And now let me try and support you in being that. Because if we're all brilliant at the one thing we're brilliant at, we're a pretty special management team, a pretty special team.
So how has your management style been adapted or changed over time? I mean, I know, there's all sorts of different types of, management, whether it's people who look at the holistic side, people who are very democratic or autocratic. How has yours changed since you've been in Connacht?
It's more my role. I think my management style, Linley, listen, it's developing and it's maturing, hopefully, and it's growing, but it's probably more my role as the coach that's changing. In my first year, I didn't have an on-field role per se, but I worked pretty closely with Jimmy on the breakdown, and I had a reasonable hands-on role with what we were doing around the breakdown and the way we carried. And similar in year two, and in this last year, I was very heavily involved in the restarts, and I was looking at continuing on with that role. But I just, funnily enough, I rang Pete Wilkins about 2 days before we flew out from Galway and said, "Pete, I'm not going to do that this year." He said, "Why not?" I said, "Well, I actually think you blokes are more than capable of doing it. And in fact, to me, I see my role now is not necessarily on the footy field blowing the whistle and yelling at players. I see it more as supporting you blokes to be the blokes sitting on the footy field blowing whistles and yelling at players." where I will have some input and some hands-on stuff with the rugby team is when we do get into opposed stuff, I'll referee that. So that then allows me to set some standards around being onside, tackle height, two at the breakdown, all the simple stuff that would go on. So I'll still have a large say in that, but I'm more than comfortable to hand the reins over to the other coaches, good young coaches coming through, to let them get their hands dirty and support them in being the best version for them, of themselves, for the team. So my role, my leadership role, hopefully long-winded answer, Linley, but my leadership role, I believe, is forever evolving and changing and hopefully getting better. But my actual role as a head coach, I think, is going to have a significant adjustment this year because of that.
That's fascinating insight. All right, to finish the podcast, I just want to go through a couple of things, a little bit more quick fire, but let's start with this, right? Myself and Linley disagree on something, and Linley, you can articulate your position clearly. My position on the new United Rugby Championship Champions Cup qualification is it's a good thing. Connacht are going to be forced to be more competitive. They're going to have to get to a higher level. It's no harm to shake things up a little bit. And yes, fine, they could finish in the top 8 and not qualify for the Champions Cup. That seems unfair. But I think, you know what, let's start challenging ourselves to be, the top province or one of the top provinces and really push ourselves. And it's only for 2 years anyways. Linda, you disagree with me on that?
Well, I do tend to take the view that you're cherry picking the top teams from each country so that you have at least a representative from each country. And I don't think that's necessarily fair for a country such as Ireland, who have actually always, for the last several years, have actually dominated this particular competition. And I think what it's going to mean is that Connacht will probably always be the ones who suffer from this, because we're the ones who are looking to attract players from the other provinces to come here to join us. And all I'm saying is, if we can finish the top 4 of the Pro 14 as we did this season, then theoretically, democratically, we should be in that competition.
Andy, who's right?
Linley, 100% Linley, because. Again, why have a competition when you're not going to pick the top people? You're going to pick it from where you live. And I was fortunate enough, or maybe unfortunate enough, to live through Super Rugby, which in the end, to me, was an absolute dog's breakfast, because you had to pick someone from Australia, someone from New Zealand, someone from South Africa. Same sort of thing. The Kiwis were always the top 5 teams. Well, if you're the top 5 teams, well, you fill the top 5 spots. Australia, we kept getting in a team because we were the best of the worst, and it just made no sense. And then they got a home quarter final. So I'm dead set against that. I just reckon have a competition, and the top 4 teams come from your country will be the top 4 teams.
Brilliant. I'm just going to stay defeated on that one. Linley, where do you sit on the 18 games instead of 22, a slightly more focused non-international clash weekend? How do you feel about that at the moment?
I'm a bit ambivalent about it. It depends on how this season is structured, where Europe comes into it. I'm a little bit ambivalent about it at the moment.
Andy, I'm kind of excited about just a little bit more focus on high-end games and not too many clashes with the internationals. Maybe opens the door for Eagles games. I'm just wondering where you sit on it.
Yeah, I'd agree with you, Rob. I think, again, one of the things that has been disappointing with the Pro 14 calendar is so many clashes with Six Nations and internationals. So, and actually, every time Connacht have played, we've played a so-called weaker team because they don't have their internationals. We lose the game because we lose concentration on that. As much as we say we don't want to, we do. So I reckon, listen, try and avoid those international windows, put out your best 15 every weekend. That's what the crowd want to see. That's what we want to see. We want to play against the best. We want to coach against the best. We want to have our best to put out there. So I actually applaud them for that. I reckon, if that happens, that's going to be great.
Are you of an opinion, or have you any strong opinions on the experimental laws that were put in place, Andy, over the last few months? And I guess there's been a few. I certainly don't like the idea of goal line dropouts, let's put it that way. What's your thoughts on that and some of the other things they were trying to introduce in the Rainbow Cup?
Yeah, well, actually, the goal line dropout was one that I was actually more comfortable with, to be honest with you, Rob. And the main reason was, like, again, I watch so much rugby now, and you get a penalty and you kick to the corner and you maul the thing over. If you don't maul the thing over and someone holds you up, if the opposition are good enough to hold you up, you get a 5 metre scrum and you do the whole thing again. So we live in this 5 metre world, 5 metres out from the try line, and it's inevitable what's going to happen. You're going to score, but there's probably going to be 5, 10, 15 minutes, or maybe not 15 minutes, 5, 10 minutes of picking and driving and blokes, 3 in a tackle and blah. And it's like, that's not what rugby's about, in my view. I think there's an element of that. But if the defence are good enough to hold you up, well, you can have the thing 50 metres back there and have another go at it. So I really like that part of the law. The one bit I didn't like about it, and you saw a couple of teams employing these negative tactics where they were kicking like nothing's on and they're 50 metres out, and they launch the thing back into the dead ball line, and you tap the thing down and they're going to get another crack at it now. Like, if you kick, in my view, if you were to kick the ball from 30 metres out as an attacking raid and ends up in the in-goal line and it gets tapped down, well, you're going to get the thing 50 metres back. So that's fine. But don't start 50 metres back and then if nothing's on, you're going to get the ball back. I don't know if that makes sense to you, but
it does.
That was, yeah.
The in-goal area of Murrayfield is very interesting target all of a sudden.
Yeah, true. So that one element of holding, of being good enough to hold an opposition team up and then trying to open play back up again, I like that. Because I think, again, you want to see more running rugby. I didn't like the captain's challenge. In my view, we've got a referee, we've got 2 ARs, and we've got the TMO. Their job is to look at all those things and to work it out themselves. But as soon as you start inviting players who are massively competitive, you get the possible negativity around trying to get someone sent off. That's not right. So I don't like the captain's challenge. I think I'm pleased that they're going to get rid of that. I believe they're going to get rid of that. What were the other ones, mate? I can't remember the other ones.
Yeah, you've got. There was the red card. That was the other big one.
The red card.
10 minutes instead, or was it 20 minutes instead of full match? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's the only thing I'm seeing at the moment is I just find that the inconsistency with those, it's just incredible. And there are things such as rugby accidents, right? Rugby accidents do happen. Now, we've got to make sure that we're not condoning those. We've got to make sure that we're protecting the players 100%. We are, but I think there's a massive difference from an incident where a shoulder hits a player in the head when he's just slipped up or the player's dropped, or a swinging arm or a stomp or something that's really malicious and nasty. That, to me, they're very, very different. So I think there just has to be some common sense start to come in that. I watched just today. I watched the England USA game, and I don't know whether you guys saw it, but there was a challenge on. There was a high ball challenge on the English fullback and by USA bloke, and Andy Brace. His initial response was, "That's yellow card. Looks like red card." And then when he watched it again, he went, "Actually, no, that's just a fair contest." And it didn't look good. Didn't look good from the English fullback's point of view, because he landed pretty nasty on his sort of shoulder, and it didn't land on his head, but it didn't look good. But I just thought, good on you, Andy Brace, because that's a rugby collision. Like, if we take that thing out of the game, we haven't got a game anymore. We're day 11 here in lockdown in Australia, so I've been pouring through AFL and pouring through any rugby league that's going on the telly, and the number of unfortunate accidents when people are trying to take a screamer in AFL and they land on their shoulder. Well, that's AFL, but you're not going to start to rule that out because it doesn't look good. I think we do have to protect the player 100%, but there are certain things that happen in the game that unfortunately you are going to get injuries. We need to try and protect as best we can, but we can't rule against everything.
Brilliant. Well, we're running out of time, so I just want to know what else, what would you recommend reading wise? You've already mentioned Dynasty. Anything else that's been you've been trolling through in between your watching AFL?
No, that's 24 hours of listening, and I do it all on Audible books. So
nice, yeah.
I love my Audible books. So that one's been fascinating. In terms of TV shows, we actually haven't been watching that much, to be honest with you. We've been pretty good. We've actually Marcella, is it? I think we got stuck into Marcella. It's a season 3 of it's a Netflix show. So We got stuck into that. But otherwise, mate, no, we haven't been doing too much.
Linley, I'm sure you can appreciate the importance of getting home. You'd love to get back to New Zealand for a while yourself. Any final thoughts before we let Andy go?
Yeah, just wondering, Andy, you're going into your 4th year now. So just very briefly, your biggest high to date, biggest achievement?
It would have to be Leinster at the RDS.
And the biggest low?
See, this is the thing, Linley. I tend to get rid of those pretty quickly out of my mind. So I really can't remember. I know there was a Scarlets this year that was frustrating. Yeah, those last 2 games, the Edinburgh and the Scarlets game, Edinburgh at home and Scarlets away, where it looked like we had nothing to play for, but we did in our own minds. We had a lot to play for, but we didn't turn up, I didn't think, anywhere near the level that we needed to. So that was disappointing. And probably the only other disappointment, I just get disappointed I think we got some amazing young footballers coming through, and when they're not getting noticed the way I think they should be getting noticed, that disappoints me. It really disappoints me. So great seeing 6 blokes up in the camp. We had 2 involved in the 23 on the weekend. Let's hope we get the other 4 this coming weekend.
And on that note, I think Bundy's just been selected for the next Lions match.
Has he really?
Yes.
Well, that's great news.
I think he's partnering Elliot Daly or something. Yeah, I just saw it there on Twitter now. So that's good news for Connacht as well.
That is good. Well, we get the other 4 blokes in the Irish setup this weekend. That'll be great news too.
Andy, listen, enjoy the break. I'm sure Connacht supporters will be delighted that you're getting a chance to get some more and enjoy hopefully the weather is good to you over there. We look forward to chatting to you next season. Hopefully it's going to be kind of emerging from the fog. Would you feel that way from what we've gone through over the last 18 months? Oh,
definitely, mate. I think, it's only up from here. We've been through the darkest days of it and we're coming out. Now, how quickly the light will shine, who knows? But every day is going to get better. Every day is getting better. So, again, for everyone's patience, perseverance, just to get through what we've been through, you'll be able to tell your grandkids, because hopefully we don't ever see that thing again. But we're just really thankful that, for your support, the Craggy podcast and Galway Bay FM and everyone's support just to get us through these last 18 months has been great, but can't wait to see you all back at the sports ground.
I'm just thinking, Andy, even 200 fans at the sports ground will drown out the subs from the likes of the Scarlets in Edinburgh, so that'll be a start, wouldn't it? Yeah, well, I actually remember the last time we had some sort of a crowd. It was the first game against Glasgow, and there wasn't a lot there, but it sounded like there was a lot. And it's funny because I'm actually watching old vision of games from a couple of years ago, and you forget how quickly or how special that the terrace has been packed. You forget how special that is. So I can't wait to get that back again. Loose, cut it loose, break out or nothing changes. Sad.